So a lot of the kids and a lot of parents have had here in the last little bit, so just kind of bear with me. Me and Miss Baker have our mints and our cough drops laying up here, so hopefully we won't have to use too many of them. I guess we need to move on to the third item on our agenda, which is time for citizens to speak. If anyone would like to come before the board, now would be the time to do so.
Hi, I'm Sharon Lynch Skeens, 606 Beach Street, Elizabethton, Tennessee. There's been several things that I don't know if y'all have done y'all's walkthrough or not that was spoken at the last meeting, and things I've seen printed in the paper about the ball fields. All my kids play in sports, so if I'm wrong, please. I had to pick my social butterfly up, my little girl from a basketball game, and so here was towards the end of the ball game. Some of the people had already left. I had counted approximately already 150 cars still there with 2 small buses, and I know that Mr. Alexander at the city meeting, I forget when it was, had said, you know, he was concerned about the people being parked out on the streets during football games and stuff. To my knowledge, that would be the only problem that would be during football. But I know that there is other sports played at T.A. Duggar. And like I said, this right here was at the end of a boys' basketball game, so I'm sure some of the girls had already left. And so, but there were still approximately 150 cars there, I counted myself, and 2 small school buses. My concern would be is maybe to look at it, and because there's also volleyball and stuff being played there, how many more, you know, I mean, would that be more cars parking out on the street? And another issue I'd like to look at, I don't know, is liability issue. I know that the men's softball can't play down at behind the jail anymore because they built that jail, and that was also nothing in the paper because of home run flies and stuff. I used to play softball myself before I got about 7 years ago, and we couldn't play behind down there where the Twins field is because of the same home run issue, hitting cars and hitting the houses. I mean, I've got my second child at T.A. Duggar, so I kind of know the ball field. My little ones played T-ball there. That's an issue that the home runs, because you got houses all the way around. You got the cars that's going to be parking on the streets. I'm just trying to look at it as a reliable issue that might need to be addressed. And might just bring that, you know, my citizen concern to that. And thank you for getting the light at Eastside. But anyway, I just wanted to, I don't know if anybody's thought about the, you know, the reasonable issues that, I mean, anybody who's ever played baseball knows that, you know, it's all about home runs and the cheering and I just don't want it to be another issue that's brought before the school board as soon as, you know, all that stuff's looked at and the parking. Thank you.
Well, you know, I had that to put on the agenda tonight, but somebody forgot to put it on.
Well, I noticed it was on on the bids and quotations. I didn't know if that was the bid and quotation.
Yeah.
So it's on there, number 7 on the regular agenda. So I didn't know if that was the bid and agenda because I've been coming to regular school board meetings, but I didn't know if that was one of the issues. But I just wanted to bring that up and just bring it to the board's attention.
Right.
Because I for one, I would love to go watch my kids play, but I don't want my windshield broken out or, you know, the other residents. I used to have a friend that lived in that neighborhood, and, you know, I just don't want to make a bigger problem.
Thank you. I appreciate that. She is one of the busiest ladies with her 4 children. She's running all the time to these different ball fields, and I do appreciate that. And I had put it on my request to put on the agenda, and when we get to that, I'll ask if they want to put it on or me ask the questions at that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Skeens. I have a nice little dent on the fender of my little truck from last year's softball season at the high school. The reason the moss fouled one off and dinged my little truck. So I can sympathize with that. But I'm sure here in the real near future, I know there's quite a few little projects that are ongoing and being considered, and you know, we as a group need to sit down and prioritize these and see what's best for the school system. I know Mr. Van Huss has worked very diligently with the T.A. Duggar ball fields, and he has a lot of answers that we have questions for. So hopefully we can meet with the staff and they can kind of head us in the right direction. Anyone else from the citizens would like to come before the board? Okay, moving on to our next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda. I guess before us now we have our consent agenda up for approval.
Move to approve the consent and the regular agenda.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, wait on discussion, do you?
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm moving a little time. I'm sorry, Ms. Armstrong. That's fine.
On the consent agenda, I have a question about number, let's see, I've marked number 1, which is minutes. Let me check right quick. Oh. Okay, no, that's okay. That's okay, I'll cover that later. How about the one on substitutes? Did we approve their salaries at the beginning of the year when we approved the budget? I guess we did. What is the going rate, or how much do we pay the substitutes now? Does anybody know? $50?
Depends on what their
It's a
their
three-step
level is.
scale, and I don't know exactly how much that is. We pay for,
50.
we do for a high school diploma, and then a college degree, and then a college degree with a current teaching license. So we have a three-step pay scale, but I do not know the actual
That's okay.
pricing.
If you could get that to me, I'd appreciate it, because I've had several people ask about that. Okay, and I would like placed on the regular agenda the item that I asked, and I can't hold it to capital projects workshops, because what I need to know gets me ready for, prepares me for capital projects. If you could add that as item 11 on regular agenda, I would appreciate that.
What are you wanting to add?
Okay, a board discussion of the architect plans for T.A. Duggar softball and baseball fields. And Mr. Van Huss gave me something here. I'm going to read it and see. Okay, thank you. But if you could put that on there, I have 2 or 3 questions, please. Thank you.
So, to keep in the parliamentary procedure, I'll amend my motion that we approve the consent and regular agenda with the addition of Ms. Armstrong's number 11 to discuss the T.A. Duggar ball fields. And I would also like to amend that we correct the minutes to reflect that we acknowledged our votes. So we may have to move that down to the regular agenda too. So that's my amendments to my motion. I think that follows parliamentary procedure.
So we have a motion and a second with
Amendments.
to add to the regular agenda and to revisit possibly the minutes for approval on the regular.
I think we need to correct what was incorrect in those, and I did not catch that when I made my motion, so I'm amending it to include her request as well as the minutes being moved into the regular agenda as well.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, so next item on our agenda is report of superintendent.
First of all, I would like to comment that at 6 o'clock at City Council this week, the girls soccer team, first time going to the state level, and the football team, and I think that was the semifinals, was it not? The quarterfinals? Anyway, that they're going to recognize those, and we'll have pictures of those individuals, and I'm sure they appreciate that. In January, I'm hoping that board members will notify the chair or me of available dates and times for a budget workshop and the Capitol tour, because we want to go to those actual sites and look at what is in fact there. Also, during the January meeting, we need to have a new board photo, which I'm sure Ms. Brewer will be here for. Now, very quickly, the personnel update. I know the new hires, Luke Johnson, T.A. Duggar, assistant girls basketball coach, effective 10/29. Chelsea Wood, ESP daycare worker, effective 12/3. Larry Adams, system-wide bus driver, effective 11/27. Jane Wassam, T.A. Duggar, assistant to the teacher, effective 12/3. Michelle Johnson, part-time assistant to teacher, Harry McCormick, effective 12/10. Reinstatement, David Stock, system-wide bus driver to full-time position, effective 11/27. That's rescinding retirement previously submitted to be in effect at 12/20. Resignation of Azur Guj, T.A. Duggar, ESP, a child care worker, effective 11/12. Transfers, Brittany Richardson from part-time assistant to teacher at Harry McCormick to interim kindergarten teacher at Harry McCormick, effective 11/30. Luann Taylor from Westside Cook to EHS Cook, effective 12/3. Charlotte McDonald from EHS Cook to Westside Cook, effective 12/3. Next page, please. Leave of absence, Lisa Hayes, EHS assistant to the teacher, from 11/27 to 1/4/13. Regina Isaacs, T.A. Duggar Cook, from 12. All righty. Thank you for rescuing me. Substitute as a dues, T.A. Duggar child care worker, effective 11/12. Suspension without pay, Darren Brewer, computer technician, from 11/27 to 11/30. Mark Norman, EHS assistant principal, from 12/5 to 12/7. Dismissal, Allison Hill, T.A. Duggar assistant to the teacher, effective 11/16. Samuel L. Grindstaff, system-wide bus driver, effective 12/3. Thank you.
I would like to ask, are you all planning to do any maintenance on the women's washroom outside the gymnasium at Elizabethton High School?
So, adjacent to the track? Do you mean the
one? Let's
that's
see.
between the track and the gym?
No, it's the washroom.
I know where you're talking about. I had a young lady ask me about that when we did our meet and greet for the lady basketball team. The washroom, you got out from the concession stand leading to the commons area.
Right.
And there's a men and a women's.
Right.
She had some concerns about the women's bathroom. Something about taking a regular stall and making it a handicap stall.
Right.
And I haven't had the opportunity to go in there and look, but I told her that we would be glad to address that at the appropriate time.
Absolutely.
So is that the one that you're talking about, Ms. Harper?
Yes.
She had some concerns about that.
Well, actually, we looked at that washroom, what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago when we talked about handicap?
Yeah, she said there's a little issue from converting a regular stall to a handicap stall.
And
Like I say, I'm not familiar. I'm not
well,
seeing it.
ADA compliance was, in that respect, was not in effect in 73, 74 in the bill. So, but we certainly need to correct that, and we can do that during the capital.
Yeah, and I told her that we'd be sure to look at that. And I'm
Absolutely. But I haven't heard anything about that.
I think we should. I was in there during the ball game or after the ball game, and they had one soap dispenser and one that looked like it had been taken off the wall, and some of the doors didn't look like they were closed. It's pretty bad. It was clean. I'll have to say the custodians did a good job on it, but it needs some repair. And so I do tell these people that have asked me that I will let the other people know. I have one more thing which I can hold to the end of the meeting. Be glad to.
Okay.
So I'll hold it.
Okay. On here, number 2 is other. I'm not real sure what other is.
No, those are reports and administrative comments there.
Okay. Reports on administrative staff. Do we have any reports on administrative staff? Mr.
Not at this time.
So I guess we move into our regular agenda. The first item on the agenda is discussion of board policy purchasing. Is this something that you may have requested, ma'am?
I thought with our board policy, not the policy too, but the capital projects workshops, we need to look at purchasing. I probably have more questions about purchasing and bids than I do most anything else since I've been on the board. And I did get the Tennessee law out, and I reread those laws, and I thought it'd just be helpful to review it, and maybe it made me do research and look at it more carefully and see if we are abiding by Tennessee law, which I'm sure everybody's trying to do that. But sometimes things kind of slip up. If you'll look under, let's see what I've highlighted, special purchases. All purchases in this category shall require specific prior board approval on an item-by-item basis, and that is line number 18 and 19 on the board, in the board policy. I noticed that this board policy had not been looked at for evidently 7 years, so I thought, well, this is a good time to look at it since we're going to think about the capital projects workshop. Under purchases, line 32, 33, and 34, purchases made by anyone not authorized by the appropriate officials shall become the personal responsibility of the person making the purchase agreement. And we actually, that happened at one time on the board. So it's very important to know if you have the authority to do that. I think the thing on the next page, page 2 of page 2, local purchasing. I have question after question asked me about local purchasing. For instance, I don't know, the last person I talked to, they have a really well-established business here in Elizabethton, but they're never receiving any, they don't ever ask them to help or to put in a bid or anything. So I thought that might be appropriate to look at that right now. It says the director of schools is authorized to purchase any needed items through suppliers approved on the state bid list. And that's one you said you all had worked pretty well with at the electric system. I was worried about it, but in that, still a little bit leery of it, of course, because we've always used the other method of just getting the 3 bids. I think you post them depending on, I guess, what we're going to order in the newspaper, and I don't know where, I guess the internet, that you post those. So it said that there was a list of these people on the state bid list, and I think you ordered computers with the state bid. Am I correct on that? Mm-hmm. And I thought, wonder who bid on that. And I don't have that list. Can you get that list for me maybe one day soon?
If I read this right, there's an exception that if it goes to the state contract process, that you no longer, I'm looking at, I think it's in 6-36115 in Tennessee Code.
Right.
I believe that's the correct area, but it says that there's an exception for the bid process if it goes through the state bid process, which is basically saying that because we're an arm of the government and the government that oversees the entire state, we're a subset of that we accept that their bid process will follow all state laws and therefore satisfy that. And I believe we stratified in our previous policy that local purchases, for ones, it says here, for purchases not subject to competitive bids, the board will make an attempt to do that through local vendors. And then in our policy manual here, it says that we will print it in the paper, in the local media, and give it 30 days notice, try to get time in. But I believe if it was over 10,000, we had to go through the bid process, whether it went outside the process of the school or not. If it goes to the state, then our bid process does no longer require us to go through the workload involved. Now, I don't know how we can get a list of the states. We may ask the director at the state level, the state commissioner of education maybe, if they can give us the bid process, the Tennessee Commissioner.
State Department of
But
Education.
it would have to be at that level, at Nashville's level, rather than, I think, at our local level here, if we're going through the state's process, because they purchase on behalf of the entire state of Tennessee, which is how they get the bid pricing. I believe, if I read this correctly, that we may do that, but we are not required to go that route. Mm-hmm. So if it's something that we wish to do that as a board, I believe we have the option to bid it out locally, but we need to understand there's a cost to the system involved every time we do that, and some of it's time and energy, and some of it's putting things in the newspapers and publishing it, and then waiting 30 extra days. So we did not on the computer issue, mm-hmm. and it went through the state bid process, which was why it got ratified, I believe. Yeah. That's my understanding. Is that correct, mm-hmm. Mr. Alexander?
That is correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I like to see the bids, even though a state is doing a comparison as to what the equipment may have. Let's say, even though the state has already approved it, and let's say one of the other vendors may have maybe 5 or 6 additional things on the computer that may be maybe $5 or $10 higher, but would may be more beneficial to purchase that because it would have those additional things. So that is one of the reasons I would like to see the bids, to where the board could actually do a comparison as to what we're actually getting. And if it was that much better, $5 was 5 times better and we get more equipment, then I would prefer paying that $5 and going with that. And then on the other end, it could be just the reverse. Maybe the state's is better and we may save more by going with the state. But personally, I like to see you make those comparisons.
When we move to the next item, there's a policy we're also going to discuss under bids and quotations, and I had a comment to that line on that, but I'll wait till we get there on the agenda.
I just want to make one brief comment here, and I'm reading here from the Tennessee Internal School Uniform Accounting Policy Manual, bid process and required documented quotes. Some vendors allow schools to purchase certain items directly from the vendor at the price quoted in contracts established by the Purchasing Division of the Tennessee Department of General Services. Schools are not required to follow the normal bid procedures when purchasing in this manner. Schools should contact the Tennessee Department of Education for information on the established contracts. So these are guidelines. We as a board can adopt and add to this if we wish. And that's something we may want to revisit here in the near future when we're looking at some of our policies and procedures, moving forward. But I feel very comfortable that the process has been met. But if there's something that we as a board would like to look at some other procedures or things like that, that's something we as a board would just have to sit down in a policy discussion workshop or something to see how we want to
and certainly we have to approve any of these before they come before. I think that's where we, on a case-by-case basis, let's just use the computers as an example. If we had chosen to say we would like to take this to a local vendor and see if they can match it, we may do that, right?
That's correct.
I believe that is legal, but we must bid it if it's over that amount by law. Again, that Tennessee 36-6 code section, I believe we must bid it. However, once we've gone through the state bid process or any other bidding process where you do it for 30 days in the paper and give notice, we followed the letter of the law. At that point, we could seek an individual with whom we've had better service. And that's, again, under the next policy, under bids and quotations. But just in terms of purchasing, as far as this policy that we're discussing, the only thing well, actually, I didn't have anything wrong with that policy. But on the next one, if we're going to discuss it when we get to that, I have an issue or two to bring up on bids and quotations.
Well, now, for instance, if you do redo, like you've redone this room, did you take these plans to the Planning Commission? Because
no,
state law says if you approve,
the state fire marshal, the city's fire marshal to look at them. That's.
received a building permit from the city, and the state fire marshal, the electrical inspector, the building inspector, of course, did all the inspections as we did the work. So.
Okay, let me ask you while you're up here. The law says that you've got to give copies of the plans to the city planning commission if you redo any part of a building or improve a building. Now, do you all go that route?
We deal with the city building inspector. In certain projects, they require drawings, which I can't speak to. I think that we did have to provide drawings, did we not, Mr. Trent? A schematic of this room. Did they make us provide a drawing for this room? We did this. No, they did. And that's based on the scope of work. That's whatever the building inspector tells us we need. That's what we provide. So that would be probably a question for him. He knows certainly more than we do. We talk to him. He tells us what we need. We do that. That's the route we go. So he would have to tell you what's required and why.
Well, I was just using this room as the easiest thing to talk about. But any building, when you maybe cut a door or a window or something, don't you have to go before the planning commission?
It depends. No, ma'am. It depends on the scope of work. Now, I can't tell you at what level the scope of work changes. That's a question for the building inspector. Certainly not me. But every time we do anything, we speak to the building inspector. So it's Robert Montgomery.
Getting back to this board policy, I wish our people had time in reference to go through and bid and do these things. They do not have time to do this. The board gives that authority to the director of schools. Now, if you don't want the director of schools to have that authority, then you need to change the policy. But we spent a lot of time last month dealing with the state bid list, and I think that needs to be looked at closely.
Okay, anything else? I think we may have kind of ran the purchasing and the second item, bids and quotations, kind of ran them together. But Dr. May, if you have some comments that you would like to make on the bids and quotations.
Yeah, while we're on bids and quotations, the first line, number 1, says all purchase of supplies, materials, equipment, and contractual services of $10,000. I think that should read more than $10,000, because if they're $10,000 and 1 cent, it technically doesn't meet that, because everything else refers to ranges. All purchase of $300 but less than $10,000 may be made in the open market without newspaper. You know, I think that's just I didn't know if we were clarifying what was already approved. This was issued in '09. It's not that old, but I think that the intent of that was to be of more than $10,000 in line 1. I think that that was the intent. And then I wanted to point out that, to Ms. Baker's point earlier, I think this is what I'm saying, is it may cost us $5 or $10 more to go local, but we may get better service if we purchase locally.
Right.
So, for instance, with a computer or a thing of that nature, we have the right to choose the higher bid. We can go with the higher bid.
The best bid, that's what's considered.
But best is valued by us, not by the dollar only. And in the last section, 15 through 18, lines 15 through 18, it talks about contracts for legal services, educational consultants, insurance. I would include maybe medical, financial, dental, things that we might contract for our students or employees, that those types of things would be included in that. But it does allow for that. In the language it says, in other entities of similar services by professional persons or groups of high ethical standards shall not be based upon competitive bids, but shall be awarded on the basis of recognized competence and integrity. And I think that kind of speaks to that, but I think we should put service and relative value as determined by the board. I think that we ought to consider when our policy workshop comes and we sit down with all these, but I believe that there's a misprint in line 1 on this, that it should read more than $10,000, because I don't think it's just $10,000. But that kind of goes without saying. It's just, since these were on for discussion, those are the notes I had written about it, and particularly the service issue. I think that's, and please speak to that, Ms. Baker, because I think that's what you're referring to as local service.
That's one of the things I was referring to, but I know in some cases a good while, years ago, when I would order equipment, I also looked at whether they had additional things attached, and again, the service played a big part, because otherwise you paid for that. So That's what I was alluding to.
Okay, I thought
Thank
so.
you.
So I thought we were going to cover that in that.
Yeah, thank you.
On line, let's see, line 6 mentions the 3 competitive bids, and lines 12 and 13, the practice of splitting an order or dividing items to be purchased to avoid the use of bidding or other purchases procedures is prohibited. So we need to remember that, because you don't want to put down like $9,999, and you can see that what they're doing is they're splitting the bids. So I think we have to be careful of that.
Ms. Armstrong, is that happening now? Is that what you're saying? You're saying
No, I
we need to
didn't
be
say
careful
that.
because it's happening? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
I did not say that. I said it could happen, and you don't want that to happen.
Absolutely not.
Because it's against the law.
Yes, ma'am.
You got that?
Yes, ma'am. Appreciate your comments, guys. I'm sure this is something that we can discuss at a future date. I got my first policy manual last Friday, and this will overwhelm me when you go look at this policy manual and all the information that's in there, and all of the
I got it too.
Yeah, so I mean, I could probably be through this whole 4 years and probably not read every page of this policy manual. But I mean, I know it's necessary, and we have to have it. We have to have guidelines for the board and administrative staff to go by. The folks, I was fortunate enough to get to go to the new school board member orientation here in the last few days, went last week, and some people down there at the TSBA that are very helpful and deal with these policy issues on a daily basis. So I'm sure that if we have any issues or any concerns, that we can forward that on to them, or possibly even have them. I don't know if this is appropriate, maybe come to one of our policy workshops and guide us maybe. I don't know if they can provide that for us. If they can, that would be very helpful, because these folks do it every day. We don't do this every day, so we need their expertise and advice, and can help us with a lot of these concerns and issues that, that we're faced with. So,
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, on our regular agenda, which is approval resolution whereby the Elizabethton Board of Education opposed any legislation to create a statewide or alternate authorizer for charter schools that would bypass the locally elected Board of Education and usurp the responsibilities entrusted to them by their constituencies. And learning that these resolutions are for us to utilize with the TSBA organization to take our concerns and our thoughts and the way that we would like to approach these issues that are facing our legislature in the upcoming session after the first of the year. So basically this is a resolution to be passed on how we feel as a board that these issues should be addressed in Nashville.
Did they address these resolutions at the workshop?
No, ma'am. No, there's a lot of other issues, but no, these resolutions weren't brought up. But I have noticed in some of our local newspapers where some of the local neighboring school systems have done these resolutions and approved them and moved them forward. So it's something that I feel like we need to address as a board and improve so that we can get our representation in the legislative process.
So, do you need a motion?
I don't. Do we need to approve these individually? I guess these resolutions have to be approved individually. Dr. Ms. Perkins. Okay, we have 3 of these. I don't know if pleasure board you want to do these individually or do them as a group. I know the actual resolutions are attached, and it's quite cumbersome. I don't know if we want to sit here and read these out loud, but I think the intent is right here with the regular agenda.
All 3.
You want to do all 3 at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no.
You want to do them individually? The resolutions?
I don't support appointing superintendents, never have.
Okay.
And so.
Okay, so let's
If
do
you're
them
going to have
individually.
discussion.
Okay.
I would make a motion that we do them individually then, or that we do the first one, and we'll go to the second one.
Okay.
So the first one is resolution attachment 10, just for reference and for a summary version of that is that the Elizabethton Board of Education opposes any legislation to create a statewide or alternate authorizer for charter schools that would bypass locally elected boards of education and usurp the responsibilities entrusted to them by their constituencies. That's the summary version. I move that we approve that resolution as written in your packets.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Well, I guess I moved on further. There's any discussion before we vote. I keep forgetting the discussion part. Does anybody would like to discuss this? Okay. All in favor, say aye. So the motion passes. The second one, briefly, it's approved resolution whereby the Elizabethton Board of Education opposes any legislation or other similar effort to create a voucher program in Tennessee that would divert money intended for public education to private schools.
I make that motion that we oppose that and make this resolved.
Okay.
Did you say opposed?
Oppose.
We're
The resolution to oppose, yes.
Okay.
The resolution as written, yes, ma'am. This is the second one, not the one you mentioned.
On the private education.
This is on the
charter schools.
charter.
Vouchers.
This is on the voucher
Vouchers.
program. We're on the voucher program now.
Okay. Oh, the voucher.
This is the second resolution in our packet. It is labeled Attachment 11, and it is basically saying that we don't think that the government of Tennessee should provide vouchers to take money out of the public school budget and give it to people to send their children to private schools, and thereby remove money from our system to give it to them.
All right.
I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to the third one. Approved resolution whereby the Elizabethton Board of Education encourages the Tennessee General Assembly to place the interest of students above any other by recognizing the value of appointed superintendents and rejecting any attempt to revert to superintendent elections.
I move that we approve the resolution, and then we can, after its motion, we can discuss it and go up or down.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, open for discussion.
Now you're on.
Well, I always have backed elected superintendents. It's not. It doesn't have to do with Mr. Alexander. It didn't have to do with Dr. Roper. It didn't have to do with any that we've had. It's just I like the idea of the superintendent kind of looking out for the public. That doesn't sound just right, but anyway, I just feel that it is a better way to go. But anyway.
I respectfully disagree in that I feel that you are, because it is an election, you're required to recruit from only within your city, which we've been fortunate to have people who resided here. But I'm concerned that for the children that we may need someday expertise that's outside of our region, and this limits us if we have to have an election of someone who lives in the region. That's really my biggest concern with having an elected person. If the expertise, it greatly reduces the people with whom you could, the expertise pool with whom you could have be our director of schools. And as we grow larger and have more complex systems, it gets more and more difficult. I think that the resolution states very well the rationale for having appointments of superintendents. I think board members should be elected simply because we're the local voice, we're the conscience, if you will, of this city, holding our superintendent, whomever it may be, accountable, and responding to the voters in hiring or firing the person in that role. And I think that is our responsibility to make certain that that occurs and that we hold them accountable to the duties because we're representing the citizens. The problem with having the election, though, it restricts the number of potential applicants to do that job greatly to whatever you have in your city. Just like there were people that couldn't vote for us simply because they lived outside of here, but they send their kids to our system. And I'm fearful that we may find ourselves 5 or 10 years down the road in that setting, looking for someone and finding that we have a very small pool of applicants.
Dr. May, I appreciate your comments, and one thing that I would just like to add, in the little orientation, I hate to keep bringing this up, but one of the most important roles as a school board member is hiring a superintendent. So if you take that away from the school board members, which are elected officials of our community, then you're taking on our biggest responsibility, or one of the most important responsibilities we have as board members is hiring the school board member. So I would like to concur with Dr. May's comments as supporting the resolution.
Well, I read through this several times. I like the idea of the people having the say as to who we have. But then again, I do like to be able to have experience outside of our community to come in. So it has some pros and cons on both sides. And maybe as board members, when we have our workshop, we can maybe add and discuss this resolution a little further during our workshop.
These resolutions, my understanding that the folks at TSBA are the one that write these resolutions, and they're the ones that take our cause to Capitol Hill, and is our voice on Capitol Hill. So therefore, in support of TSBA's efforts in constructing these resolutions, I don't see how we could alter or change it to meet, our local needs when the other school systems are using these same resolutions.
Well, some have, but again, you do have to contact them, and they will give you some steps or suggestions as to what you want, or either tell you that you can't. And that's one of the reasons I like being a part of that, because we are able to call, we are able to talk to them and see exactly what we can do. But that's one that, like I said, I can see both sides of it very easy.
Okay, well, we've had a nice discussion here. I guess now we've got a motion and a second, and we'll bring it before the board to see how we want to proceed with this, and take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so I've got 3 ayes and 1 nay. Okay, moving on to our next item on the agenda is one that we added at the request of Ms. Armstrong, is the T.A. Duggar ball fields. Ms. Armstrong, how would you like to proceed with this?
Yes. This was to kind of get me ready for Capitol Workshop. But I was under the impression that there were some changes being suggested on this right here, the drawings, but evidently I was wrong. I know I'd like to have heard Bill Malone. I'd like to have heard Bill Malone and Tom Williams too, especially Bill Malone's with environmental, isn't he?
Yes, ma'am.
Doesn't he test that?
He's my environmental engineer.
I came for that meeting, but they wouldn't let me in.
Mr. Malone, oh, I know which meeting you're referring to. I don't know who wouldn't let you in.
I couldn't get in. That's okay.
At this point, the only thing that's been discussed on changing is not when you per se look at that drawing. We've looked at some things. Of course, we put the project out for bid, and the bids came back, and at this point in time, they're outside the budget. So we are working with the lowest bidder to look and see if there were some value engineering things that we can do, maybe some of the bells and whistles that we had to maybe take out to get it back down into a range within the budget that we have. And then, of course, if we were able to do that, we'd bring that to the board and present that to you as to whether or not you want to proceed or not. So that's the process we're in now. There's not anything new drawing-wise. The fields are going to be the same size, shape. You're talking about things like underground drainage on the infield. There's not a field in Elizabethton other than maybe the Twins field that maybe has a system like that. So that's one of those things that would be great to have, but is outside the scope of our budget. So those are types of things that we're looking at to remove to get the cost down more in line with the amount that we have budgeted for that.
But the sizes are still the same
absolutely.
as right here.
Yes, we cannot or would not. At the end of this process, we're going to have a softball field with those dimensions and the baseball field of those dimensions. Okay. That is our intention. If we can't do that, I'm telling you that we're not going to be in favor of the project. If we can't do that within the scope of the budget, we just won't do it at all. I mean, we're committed to having a softball field and a baseball field.
Right.
So.
Okay. What about washrooms? Have you thought about those things?
Yes, we have. Right now, at this point, it'd be great to be able to construct those. But as you see in the plans, right in between, on the concrete area, in between the baseball and softball field, okay, you'll notice a little circular area there, and that area is designated at some point in time in the future for a concession stand press box. Right. So it would be angled in a way so it would be facing the softball field in one direction and the baseball field in the other, and underneath it would have restrooms. At this point in time, what we would do in the old band room shop area, there are bathrooms there now, so if we had sporting events, they would use the restrooms in that shop area. That's what we would do until we were able to fully construct restrooms there.
And you're not worried about the windows in the media center, are you?
No, I think if you look at the orientation of the ball field, I don't think that would be an issue. If there is a concern for that, we can always put a screen over that window. But if you look at the next time you're down there, if you look at the orientation, the way the ball would be hit, there's not any windows on the back side, and the furthest one on the side is so far. I think it's very remote. I mean, I'd be more worried about them hitting the roof than anything. I'm not that worried about. One thing we have talked about doing, and some of the doors in the media center have started rusting. We've talked about replacing the door, and maybe one of the closest door toward the back of the media center has windows in it. But my suggestion would be when we replace that door, we maybe put a full metal door that doesn't have the glass in it to alleviate. That's the one spot that has the most glass that could be in jeopardy, I guess.
And you're not adding any more parking?
No, ma'am.
I know exactly what she's talking about.
And I understand that and appreciate that, but what I would say is we have the exact same issue at the high school, and I think if you went to Wrigley Field, if you parked outside Wrigley Field, on the street, you have a chance of getting your vehicle, hit. That's just the nature of it. I don't know that we can find a spot. Same thing at the Twins Field. If they foul a ball back, cars get hit out in the parking lot right down here at Joe O'Brien Field. So I don't know that we're ever going to find a place that's not going to be, a threat of that happening. So I'd much rather see us have a place our kids can play and work around those issues as best we can. That's my opinion. Yeah, you'll have the final vote.
Yeah, I keep worrying that there's just not quite enough land there, I guess, is what concerns me.
Right.
But,
well, one thing we're trying to do to alleviate that, especially along High School Street, is the fence that we erect there will be higher in order, so it's not just your regular, 6-foot fence. We're going to erect it's either 12 or 14-foot fence so that it makes it much harder to hit a ball out. Will balls be hit out over there? I'm sure. I guarantee they will. But again, I don't think you're going to find any place that and it's very similar to the dimensions at some of the other fields that T.A. Duggar plays at. As you increase the fence height, it essentially makes it a longer distance to hit a home run. So obviously the higher the fence, the higher you have to hit it, which makes it a longer home run. So we can adjust the size by extending the size of the fence. So that's the intention there. I think you spoke with a prominent softball person from the community, I believe, went up there and looked at it, and he was very favorable of the project, wasn't he? I'm sorry, but you did speak with him, and he was favorable of the project, correct? So we're excited about that because he is certainly very knowledgeable. So
known all over the state.
He sure is.
Well, I just wonder if there was some way maybe you all had changed a little bit.
No, again, we're looking at some things like you'll notice there's some concrete pads for batting cages. Those are some things that we would look at taking out at this point, and maybe we'll be able to do that maybe in the summer with some of our inmate labor. There's things that we can do. We're looking at things we can pull out and maybe do in the future on our own to try to lower that cost.
Well, do you have an idea, any speculating how much this will cost?
Not at this point. I hope to have something. We're still working with the contractor, and the contractor along with the grade. A lot of the grade work is the real cost, so they're in the process of doing that right now. So I won't promise, but I certainly hope that we're going to have something to present in January, a detailed listing there, something to bring before the board for you to consider.
So you think this will be done by?
Now, I don't know. I'd be afraid to speculate on that. If we're fortunate enough to have that information in, and let's say we brought it before the board in January and you approved it, I'm hoping that they would be able to start, depending on weather. That's the bad part now, within 30 to 60 days, and they're looking at, 60 to 90 days to complete the project. So it won't be ready this spring. There's no way for that. But the good thing is, well, the bad thing is, again, we're doing it because there's no fields there now. So it's really not going to affect this year's group. So that would give us the summer as a growing season for the fields, the grass, and then it would be ready in the fall for football practice and, of course, the next year for baseball and softball. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, that was our last item on our regular agenda.
On the minutes.
Excuse me, yes. The issue about our minutes being...
Yeah, we haven't. We approved. We moved those off the consent agenda to approve them now. And I don't know how we want to word the minutes. My suggestion is that an addendum be made footnoting the section where the chairperson vote was obtained, and then putting at the end that this was taken up and that we made our votes attributable to what we had stated, so that we stay in compliance with the law and state that from the original meeting we've been in compliance. We just had not approved the minutes yet because we didn't recognize that we were not attributable to our own votes. We took credit for what we voted.
Yeah.
So all I want to do is add that as a footnote to the addendum to the minutes, so that if anyone were to read simply the minutes from November 15, that they reflected that was not done improperly. I felt like that if they were only to look at November 15, that they would not see that we had made our votes attributable to the person who made them.
Question. Can we not approve these minutes and add them to our January meeting to approve the minutes then? Is that appropriate, or do we need to do it now? Just prove the minutes with the attachment that Dr. May is.
Just in a footnote, basically it just amendment to them.
Yeah. In our December.
Yes, it would need to be in both minutes. Okay. It would be in next minutes that we discovered it after the fact, and that prior to the approval we corrected the action. And the action that was corrected, what the result was, and who's voted which way.
Okay. Is that in form of a motion, Dr. May?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want me to restate it in form of a motion.
If you'd like. If it'll be cleared up.
I move that we approve the minutes as written with the amendment, with the addendum footnoted to the section discussing the the fourth paragraph, with a footnote to the fourth paragraph that states that the members recognize that their votes, while held in public, were not individually attributable to the person casting the ballot, and they rectified this prior to approval of these minutes by stating whom they voted for with the results as follows, and then list those. That's the motion.
Well stated. I have that as well. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Ms. Armstrong. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Excuse me.
I have one more item.
Okay.
I would push to address. I wasn't planning to until today. I had a lady come by with WJHL and knock on my door, and she said, "I need to talk to you." And of course I had no idea what she was talking about. And she said that she had received a letter anonymously from a school board member. And that it dealt with, sorry, I'm putting the sheet back on. Comes off. It had dealt with this letter right here.
Yeah.
And so I was going to ask which school board member mailed this to WJHL and wanted a story done on it. I knew Ms. Baker would not, and I wouldn't think either of you two did.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not.
I don't think so, because this one is dated October 22nd. And she said they had received it anonymously from a school board member. And so I said, you know, I don't know anything about this. I know very little about the whole issue. And so I pulled what I had on file about that. I had 3 emails is all I had. And that's all I know about this issue of potential donations or donors. And I picked up on that in the attorney's bill that he sends to the board each month. And I keep seeing that in there, and I question it at a time. But it was never on the agenda to talk about or be explained to what was happening. So I really didn't know anything about it, and I told her this. And she said, well, we're going to talk about this at 5 o'clock and 6 o'clock tonight. And I told my husband, I said, you go in there and look and see what happened, because I don't know anything about this. And so he did, but he got the end of it, so that didn't help a whole lot. But anyway, from what I have gained from these 3 emails that I have received, and I don't know if new board members have received any of these or not, and it doesn't matter if you have or if you have not. And if not, maybe we can get you a copy. But it seems that I felt like someone was kind of targeting me and accusing me of doing something I didn't have any knowledge about. And so I thought, well, I need to clear this up, and I had not planned to do this. And then after she talked with me today, I thought, well, I need to address that. So that's what I'm doing. The money, I had no idea how much that money was until I think it was mentioned, now you correct me if I'm wrong, at the last board meeting, that was available through a trust fund. I have no idea who that was. And my opinion is it was designated to be used for science and not for athletic facilities. And that's what this system wanted, was athletic facilities instead of the science facilities. And so we didn't get the money, evidently, and I don't know if we will or will not. From what I read, probably not. But I just wanted to clarify that. It's not my fault. I had nothing to do with this, nothing. And if it had been discussed at a board meeting, and I had been given that choice, well, do you want to take this money and build the new stadium and the ball fields, or do you want to use it for science? Definitely, I would have said, use it for the science program. There's no way I wouldn't have said that. And my opinion is that money was set aside. I don't know this for a fact. This is an opinion. That the money was set aside for science. But for some reason, the school system wanted the athletic field. And this presented a problem. So I just want people to know, not my fault. The buck stops not here this time. And I told my husband about that, and we were discussing. I said, should I say those things? He said, yes. They tell them. to quit accusing me of things that I don't do. And I had not done that. So I thought, well, I'll do it. But I don't know who should I point the finger at.
Ms. Armstrong, did I not address that in a meeting? I got permission from the chairman, Mr. Cooter, in the old boardroom. Did you not use confidential information and approach Rodney Klein to get money for the animal shelter? Yes or no?
No.
You didn't. You admitted that we have it on record.
I said, I want money for the animal shelter, but I did not specify I wanted school funds for the animal shelter. Why, that'd be crazy.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
It would not
I think
have
we're
been
kind of getting
right.
off. I appreciate your comments, Ms. Armstrong, and clarifying as far as
Yes, I just
a
want
board
people to know
member
that.
saying anything. Honestly, I have no idea.
I didn't think you did.
Dr. May and I are kind of new at this
Yeah.
and kind of coming in on some things that were taking place in
I
previous
hesitate.
meetings.
I
But
really didn't know whether I should do it.
I appreciate your comments, but
But since they had it on TV, I felt I needed to.
It may be on the 11 o'clock news. Try to catch it.
5 o'clock and 6 o'clock.
Oh,
And
then
I
am
still
the
don't know who sent the letter.
And to my knowledge, I don't know if anybody, I can say myself, of accusing you of anything, Ms. Armstrong, or anyone on this board. I have confidence, and I can only speak for myself, but I don't know of anyone that is accusing you of anything, and it's very unfortunate if that's.
But I'm sorry.
But
I didn't
people
want
can
to upset
allege,
you two new people.
a
But I had to do
number of
that.
things.
I wouldn't have slept tonight if I hadn't done that. Did you send that letter, Mr. Alexander?
No, ma'am.
Did you have somebody send that letter?
Ma'am, are you accusing me of doing
No.
that? I don't have time to pursue you and the things that you're doing. And we need to stay on the agenda so we can get through these things. These
Okay.
people worked all day.
Well,
We're getting way off base here,
Yeah.
folks. Let's try to wrap up our meeting. We've had a good meeting, and Ms. Baker, if you would like
I
to.
won't do
Oh.
that again.
Yeah, well, it needed to be discussed because it is on TV and it's on our local station, so that needed to be brought out. And it may be on the 11 o'clock news, but that's not what I was raising my hand for. I was surprised when Ms. Armstrong said she wanted to attend a meeting that was going on in this building and she wasn't allowed to attend. I'm hoping that any board member, if there's a meeting going on that's pertaining to our school system, we would be able to come in and sit in on it, regardless of whether it's Ms. Armstrong or you or anyone, because that gives us more in-depth information when we get up here to vote that we were actually sitting in the meeting. So hopefully, if there are other meetings, they'll be listed in the time. Of course, we are busy. Most of us don't have the time to attend a lot of the meetings. But if we are able to, and we know of that meeting, or if it's, let us know, please, so that we can come if there's a meeting that's pertaining to, especially things that we're going to have to vote on and make decisions on that we can share with our other board members. And if we can add that either during our next work session or when we need to, I think we do need to discuss that. And thank you.
Just as a note, Ms. Baker, for clarification, the weekly email that Mr. Alexander sends out, he always sums up what has occurred during the past week, what he has done, and then also the important items that are coming up in the week ahead. So it might help if there's something coming up in the week ahead once you receive that email that he sends you, if you would call and speak to him about that and perhaps, schedule a time to come in and discuss it with him.
Okay, well, there's a number of things that I received last week, which I won't go into. Last Friday, as a matter of fact, that I did not know was being done. But like I said, if we find out and we do know that and have the time, I would like to attend or sit in on the discussions. And I'm sure maybe some of the other board members may have interest to where they may want to do so, but we can discuss that during our workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Just a reminder, our next board meeting is Thursday, January the 17th at 6:30, right here in this room. I would just like to take this time to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a very happy holidays, and hope everybody enjoys it, and hope we can get feeling better and everybody feeling well. I know it's been through my household, and it seems like it ended up with me being the last one. So hopefully everybody can be healthy and wise and ready for the new year coming up for us. So I guess we adjourn, or do I have to have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I make a motion.
Do I have a second to adjourn? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.